Thank you, Henry. And thank you, friends at CCAT, for hosting us. And thank you to all of our colleagues. I see some very familiar friends and colleagues in the chat that have joined us. And I hope to meet new acquaintances through our conversation today. It really is an honor to be here. As you've seen with some of the promotion around this lecture series, this is one of my formal final acts as acting administrator for the Highway Administration. With the new administration will come new leadership. And so this is sadly and bittersweet my last week here in this role. But as many of us know, we have long been in this sector and will long continue to be in this sector. And so I just want to share my ideas on the top 10 list for the future of transportation. But before I start that, I just want to center us and begin us with two items. First is, I just returned from a yoga and meditation retreat in Palmaya, Mexico. This is something that I do each year to promote the balance of health and wellness within our professional and personal lives. And whether you are a yogi or not, I think it's always a wonderful idea to take a moment in our very busy lives and maybe just close your eyes, even while you're on the computer, tablet, or phone with me, and just take a deep breath. That is what we need to do in transportation to remind us that we can reflect and recenter and refocus on our goals. And before I begin my top 10 list, the second thing I wanted to share is a grounding exercise to remind us why we are in this space within transportation. And I want to start by honoring one of my colleagues who is named Marcus Young, who's a behavioral artist out of the state of Minnesota. And he was for many years the artist in residence at Minnesota Department of Transportation. And in his work, he would hold small series and workshops, just kind of like how we're convening today. And he would start with a similar exercise of breathing. And then he would ask, what is your transportation story? And by that, he was asking, what is the first memory you have or the first thing you can remember about transportation? For some people, it might be flying in a plane for the first time. For others, it might be getting a driver's license and the freedom of driving in the open road. For others, including the 42,000 Americans whose lives are lost each year in our system, it might be a fatal or horrific crash that dramatically and irreparably impacted our lives. And that, for me, is where my transportation story starts. Everyone, I came into this field in two very different ways. For those of you that don't know my background, I was born and raised in Western South Dakota in the beautiful Black Hills, which I'm still very proud to be part of and continue to visit throughout my time in my career. And in Western South Dakota, we did not have public transportation. At the age of 14, we were legally allowed and licensed to drive because of the agronomy and the farming community. And I can promise you all that at the age of 14, Kristin White was not ready to drive because within her first week, I did in fact receive 3 citations for speeding. It's just another reminder that safety is the beginning and end of our story in transportation. And I learned that the hard way 2 years later, when 3 people who were important to my life, Tate Glatter and his father and brother, were killed in a violent drunk driving incident. It dramatically changed the conversation around my small town. And a year later, my dad's best friend, Bob Gallant, was killed while driving a semi-tractor trailer. Now, those 2 crashes are already horrific and changed the community in my life, but they also were preventable by the technologies that you all and CCAT continue to research, develop, and deploy. And the second part of my transportation story, and I hope you're reflecting on yours as we conclude today or in conversation, is when I really had someone who helped me understand what it means to help someone find their destination. So after college, I was awarded the Fulbright Fellowship from the State Department. And this small town Midwesterner took her first international trip and her first international plane trip in moving to Tokyo, Japan. And I remember very vividly the memory of sitting in that plane, departing from SFO Airport and watching the California coastline slowly get smaller and smaller. And the very inexperienced, unworldly little girl in me started to have a panic attack and hyperventilate on the plane. And so for 14 hours, the 2 people next to me, and I still remember Akiko-san's name, she sat next to me in her very broken English and my very broken Japanese. We started a conversation. We started to get to know each other. She started to ask me about what I was doing, moving to Japan, and what my life was like in America. And I told her I was so scared to land because I didn't know, literally and figuratively, where I was going to go. And so when we landed in Narita Airport in Tokyo, which is a city of 33 million, one of the largest in the world, she and her partner led me up into the Chikatetsu map, which is the subway map, which if you have not Googled the Tokyo subway map, please do that after we're here today. It's one of the most beautiful pieces of artwork and complex systems in the world. And she taught me how to look at a subway map, what public transportation looked like when you're on the subway car, how to take a token and convert your dollars into yen and get onto the car. And then she took an hour out of her way to help me get to my destination so I'd get there safely. And friends, that is all of our transportation story. Your work, my work, our work as an industry helps us get to our destination safely. We are wayfinders. We help people lead and connect to where they need to go. And so that is what I'm going to talk about for our time today, and make sure we have lots of time for question and answer. So I'm going to start my personal top 10 list for the future of transportation. So get your pens out or start ignoring me, whatever it is. I look forward to the question and answer after I share these ideas. First and foremost in my top 10 is the concept of human-centered design, or HCD. Now, I believe this should be incorporated into every single thing that we do. And so I want to take a moment and ask you to reflect yourself rhetorically. Do you know the definition of what human-centered design is? Do you know what the 6 steps of human-centered design are? Because I can assure you that a decade ago, I did not either. And so I had to learn, and I took courses from Stanford's D School, one of the preeminent global institutions that looks at design thinking. And it reminds us about, first and foremost, the definition of human-centered design, which is quite simply just taking a different approach to problem solving and putting people at the center of the problem. And it starts with 6 key steps. And the first is something that's very important and near, dear, and personal to me, which is 1, empathetic inquiry. So look at that first word, empathetic. It's trying to understand who we are designing for. What are the needs of our community members? What are their challenges every day? So in transportation, you're asking them, what is the hardest part of getting to work, or getting your kids home, or making sure they get to school on time? People might in your community conversation say things like, I feel like I have to speed to get to work, and I know that's unsafe. Or I'm mobility challenged and I have to wait 2.5 hours for my mobility service to pick me up and take me to my doctor. Or maybe it's something as simple as, I'm a single woman and the only transportation at night is on a dark bus stop and I'm scared to stand there alone. So empathetic inquiry is where all of our conversations in transportation should begin and end. But the second step is defining the problem statement. What is the problem we're trying to solve for? The third step is ideation, and this is exciting. Now think to yourself, when is the last time I was in front of a whiteboard and I had Post-its or a dry erase marker and we started to brainstorm the art of the possible? We don't, friends. Too often we think we have a solution, or we come up with a couple solutions, and that's where we go from. And we are missing the big picture of brainstorming and ideation. The fourth step is prototyping. Now, this is what you all in this community are great at. You take an idea and a tangible solution and you make it real, tactical, tangible. And then, of course, the fifth step is you test it. Does it work? Why not? And you help improve it. And the sixth step, now some folks will say there's only 5 steps, but really the sixth step in human-centered design is going back to the beginning, going with that initial group and asking, did this idea and did this solution meet your need? And if not, how can we improve it? Now, friends, we fail ourselves in the first 3 steps of human-centered design. We are not empathetic enough in understanding the lived experience of our colleagues and communities. 2 is we solve for the wrong problem. How many times have you been in a conversation with public and private sector or your own colleagues and asked, is this even a problem, or is this actually the problem we're trying to solve for? And the third step we often skip over is going right to the solution instead of brainstorming. So I'm challenging us in my first of our top 10 list, learn human-centered design, learn the steps, and incorporate it into your daily work. That's what I will be doing when I transition out of public service and into my new opportunity to ensure all of us understand HCD and its 6 principles. Now, my second idea for our top 10 list is meaningful public engagement. And I mean the word meaningful very intentionally. Now, I know a lot of us have been in community conversations. We worked with customers. We might even try and imagine what the customers in our communities want out of research, technology, and connected and automated and other innovations. But how many of you, and again, the rhetorical question, how many of us on this webinar and this call have sat in a community meeting and actually had a conversation directly with a community member? I've been in some of these meetings, friends, where I was not welcomed by introducing technology to the conversation. They felt I was jumping to a solution. And so what I learned the hard way is what we call the spectrum of public participation. And for those of you that don't do public engagement work, the International Association for Public Participation, or IAP2, is a wonderful resource in this realm. And Federal Highway Administration does some of this work where we talk about moving from the older model on the left side of the spectrum, from informing or informed consent, to a different model, which I'll talk about here in a moment. Now, back in the 1960s, when the interstate system was built and Congress passed the Interstate Act, we were informing communities. We only allowed them consent to desecrate and sometimes completely decimate some communities to install highways and interstates. And we've learned from that lesson. What the IAP2 public participation spectrum tells us is, instead of informing, there's a spectrum of public engagement that moves from empowering, collaborating, and really ensuring that we give the power into the communities we are trying to support. And that's that far right side of the spectrum, which is empowering them. So we need to learn about these different types of public engagement, from informing, involving, to collaboration. And what I would like to advocate we should all be doing is empowering our communities to have the solutions. As the IAP2 tells us, empowering communities means, quote unquote, we will implement what you decide, and the power's in their hands. Third, innovation in our field, and here I might say something controversial, we have learned is less disruptive and more incremental. Now, I want to take a step back. I started some of this work in the city of Minneapolis back in the day and age where scooters were getting deployed randomly across the globe, including across many American cities. Seemingly overnight, they popped up on curbs and sidewalks, and community members were questioning both how they could use it, and many community members still use these scooters, but other community members were asking, how are these going to get scattered about? How are they going to be safely deployed? Why are they in my way? And so many of us questioned whether this technology would help or hurt. And we had similar conversations around automation. Years ago, a decade ago, Tesla told us that self-driving cars would be coming about in 2 years. And many of us know that we're still waiting, despite the fact really wonderful, safe, scaled deployments in communities like California, Arizona, and Texas. What do these two examples tell us? They tell us that technology and innovation is filling gaps in our system. It is trying to help disrupt us, but we first need to incorporate human-centered design as a part of that process. Because these types of innovations we'll continue to look at, whether it's autonomy, connectivity, electrification, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, digitalization, and digital infrastructure, and data sharing. As the adage goes, humans are excellent at predicting what the future looks like, but we're actually really not good at predicting when. And so that's why it's just a reminder that we need technology and innovation. We need the private sector to push government, and we need government to regulate private sector, so that we come to this common approach to understand that we will innovate transportation, and we must, but it just might look a little different than in some of the conversations we've been in. And that leads us to my fourth idea. The fourth concept that I think we need to be thinking about in the future of transportation and innovative mobility is we need new governance models. So take a step back and look at the concept of airspace transportation. So the way we fly. Many of you are flying for the holidays. Maybe you did for Thanksgiving. Maybe you're thinking about it over Christmas and the other cultural holidays in the new year. And just think about all of the planning and the personnel and the collaboration it takes to manage the national and global airspace system. We have to have pre-planned trips. We have to have air traffic controllers. We have one point of destination as an airport, which is a hub, and everyone has to plan these trips well in advance. Or at least air traffic control has to predict all of the various flight routes, and we control those to ensure our number one priority of safety. Now, take that and think about surface transportation. It's very different. We have different governance models. We have the federal government, which helps to oversee interstates. We have state departments of transportation. We have counties. we have cities, we have townships, we have regional and metropolitan planning organizations. We have people that scoot, people that walk their bike, people that walk, people that roll. We have people that get in their car at the moment's notice and say, you know what, I need to go to the store and get some milk to make sugar cookies or pies for the holidays. And they don't plan these trips often well in advance. What that tells us is we don't have a similar model to govern the large national priorities of surface transportation. And that's where we've been talking about at the federal government, an opportunity where federal, state, and local agencies can collaborate more and break down silos. And yes, we know we have silos. And I'm going to honor one of my former colleagues, Vince Mamato, who, if many of you don't know him, you should. He is the former division administrator for California, our largest division here in the country. And he used to joke that here at the federal government, we don't have silos. We just have cylinders of excellence. But what that reminds us is we have an opportunity to have conversations like this and to create liaisons, I would like to see, which are people that are embedded. Maybe it's staffers within each organization, and their sole job or part of their daily and ongoing task list and job description is to look at what outside agencies are doing. Maybe, and for example, we did this at the State Department of Transportation, where we would have staff that would attend association meetings and meet with the American Metropolitan Planning Organization, who I see is on the call today. We would meet with ASHTO, who represents state DOTs, and NACO, who represents counties, so that we would all understand who is doing what. And I would love to envision a future, my friends, where we can do this in a more organized, institutionalized fashion to build relationships across federal, state, local, and regional partnerships. Now, I will say that the ITS Joint Program Office, if you're unfamiliar, is one of those entities. With their new leader, Brian Cronin, they are ready and willing to lead the way into this new governance model in future. And I hope you're all working with them. And I have challenged, as I depart, the U.S. Department of Transportation to do more, to work with MPOs, counties, local agencies, and to build that strong federal, state, and local partnership so that we can have this governance model of the future. So fifth, okay, we're halfway done with my top 10 list, although I will put a little reminder that Kristin is not an engineer nor a mathematician, to my father's chagrin, so there might be a couple more than 10. So fifth, one thing that I'd love for us to continue to talk about is scenario planning. And I'd love to see us continue scenario planning and plan innovation and technology into our long-range plans, STIPs, and TIPs. So let's take a step back for a moment, and I want you to ask yourself, do I know what a STIP is? And do I know the difference between a STIP and a TIP? And this is where, because transportation is such a large sector, too often our research side and our operations side does not talk with our planning and policy side. And that is a real disservice to us all. So for those of you, let's take a step back. We use some acronyms. Let me define them. Now, I'm sorry I'm defining something that probably many of us may already know, but a STIP is a statewide transportation improvement program or plan. And each state, under Federal Highway Administration rules, to get federal highway funding, they must have a STIP that's approved by us. And a STIP is a 4-year plan that says these are all the projects we're going to be doing. This is how much that project is estimated to be. And this is the project. It's where it's going to be in a general scope. And a TIP is a very similar document, a transportation improvement program that's for regional or metropolitan planning organizations. Again, these are really, really important documents because we already know between the next 4 years where we're going to be investing and how. And in addition to that, states and regions have additional documents like 10-year plans, 20-year plans, or maybe even 30 and 50-year vision documents. And so my question to you is, how are you integrating your innovation, your research, your deployments, your technologies into these documents? At the state of Minnesota, when we led our connected and automated vehicle program, we asked ASHTO this in about 2018. So again, the 52 states within the state DOT representation and membership of ASHTO, and very few were able to say that they were building technology and innovation into their STIPs and TIPs. But I know that has changed, and I hope it continues to change. And the second thing I mentioned is scenario planning. Now, scenario planning is this wonderful part of the planning process that more and more states and regions are using that says, I might not know the future. I might not, going back to my earlier point, know if scooters are going to be the mode of the future for any number of communities. I don't know when self-driving cars may or may not come into a larger percentage of the transportation network, but I know that these are possibilities. And so you can come up with different scenarios. So for example, you could come up with a scenario where connected vehicles will rapidly expand and deploy in the next decade. And I'll touch on that here in a moment. And in that scenario, what investments do you need to be making in the next year, the next 5 years, the next 10 years, so that your state and your communities are prepared? That is where scenario planning can come into play. And AASHTO states and many of you all, including at AMPO, are wonderful resources to help us in this space, including scenario planning at the Federal Highway Administration. Now, one thing that I want to give a shout out for is, here's a document. If you are looking at this, this is our new V2X deployment plan. And I'm very excited and proud that this was launched in August of this year, along with 3 grants through our V2X accelerator program earlier in the year. This is an example of how states can help plan in both planning and scenarios. The federal government realized after 2 decades of research, we needed to find and define our leadership role and set key milestones so that the public and private sector could understand where we thought you should be investing, planning, researching, and deploying at least connected vehicle technologies, which is what we call V2X or vehicle to anything technologies. And so that's why these planning documents are so critical, because the information in here, if you're not already aware or in the connected vehicle space, you should be learning what's in here. It's going to tell you where public and private sector needs to be going, and then you can build that into your own planning documents in your own corporate organization or within your public agency. I hope you're still with me, friends. I'm excited for the conversation. So number 6 is beginning and ending with safety. Now, I say that, and you're probably thinking, but you didn't necessarily begin your top list with this or end with it. And there's an intentional reason for that. I'm putting this in the middle because this should be the center of our conversation. Now, think to yourselves, in the few 26 minutes we've been on this call together, we've already lost lives on our American highway system. Again, 42,000 people have lost their lives. They've been killed because we need to accomplish our Vision Zero goal of eliminating road traffic fatalities. So let me ask you these couple questions. Reflect on this. First, did you speed this past week? And just be honest with yourself. 2, did you cross at the crosswalk? Did you wait for the walk sign? The reason I ask these questions, my friends, is because we are all ambassadors for safety. Safety is part of who we are. It is why we do this work. And yes, we also have other mission critical values like equity, sustainability, resiliency, and building our economy, but we can't get to those values if we don't keep people safe. That is why we must continue to think about the 4 things that we've done at the Federal Highway Administration, the U.S. Department of Transportation, that I hope you are aware of. And if not, I'm going to talk about them very briefly so you can incorporate your conversations to begin and end with safety. First and foremost, I referenced Vision Zero. And many of you are already familiar with this concept, but I'm really proud that 3 years ago, the United States joined our United Nations global allies to commit to publicly documenting our Vision Zero approach to the U.S. Department of Transportation. This is the first time in American history that we actually said we are committing to a goal to eliminate traffic fatalities. And guess what? Your work in technology and innovation is an absolutely critical and fundamental part of that solution. Now, the second thing we've been doing at the Federal Highway Administration, I'm very proud of our safety office, who's developed 28 proven safety countermeasures. Now, again, I'm going to take a step back and ask, do you know what PSCs and these proven safety countermeasures are? Can you name 1 or 2? Well, I'll give you 3 examples. 3 of these 28 include things like the simplicity of a protected bike lane, a roundabout, or even improved lighting. These are 3 relatively low-cost investments that should be in your STIP or TIP, and that are technology solutions that save lives in a proven way. And so Federal Highways developed 28 of these proven safety countermeasures that you should know in your work so that you can continue to innovate in your field. The third thing that we've also developed this year is what we call a design hierarchy. And I'm really excited about this. It was launched almost 1 year ago. And the design hierarchy is this idea that whether it's 28 proven safety countermeasures or the countless additional things we can do to improve safety, we understand you have to start with step 1. We can't boil the ocean. We can't do everything at once. Just like the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once reminds us, we just need to start with 1 simple step. And so the design hierarchy says, if you're just going to do one thing, start with this first series, then go into the second hierarchy, then go into third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and so on. And so all of you, I welcome you to go to the Federal Highway Administration website and learn what both the proven safety countermeasures are and how to implement them in a hierarchical way under the design hierarchy. And fourth, and lastly on this piece, we are promoting a safety culture. Now, remember those questions I asked you. Did you speed? Did you wait at the crosswalk for the cross signal? If you haven't, you're not embodying our safety culture. And so the Federal Highway Administration and the U.S. Department of Transportation are reminding us and providing more resources on how to be a leader and lead where you are. You don't have to be in my role or have a title to lead from where you're at, to remind us that all of us build and represent the safety culture. And so we did this, for example, at Federal Highway Administration's fall business meeting. We meet twice a year with our top senior management to talk about safety and other priorities for the administration. And we did walk and talks to learn about the community and see more about the city of Chicago and learn about its transportation system. But after the walk and talks, I had to hold the team accountable because we did see people that didn't cross at the crosswalk. And just because you're exiting your office or exiting the building you work in doesn't mean you don't work in transportation. You are always on and an ambassador to show what a safety culture looks like. So 7, job creation and the future workforce. So this is something that I know is really important to many of us. What are the skills of the future and how to create good paying jobs, which is a big priority for the Biden-Harris administration. And so credit to the University of Michigan. For those of you that are not aware, I want to give you a resource. In 2021, lead author Sarah Crane, along with a half a dozen researchers from University of Michigan, launched what they called the Michigan Middle Skills Report. That is something we should all be writing down. Again, the Michigan Middle Skills Report. This report talked about 2 key takeaways. First is that our workforce is changing. This idea that we could just, sit at a desk and have vocational skills is the way of the past. For those of us in technology and innovation, we realize, and this report and research shows, the career of the future is combining technical and vocational skills to highly individualized and trained skill sets that include mechanical skill sets, electrical, electronic systems, data systems, software, systems processing and engineering. And these are 6 of the key skill sets in the future, and also happen to be critical, mission critical skills in the connectivity, automation, electrification, and transportation innovation sector. But the second key takeaway from that report in building jobs for the future was that you have to combine these very technical skills and vocational skills with what used to be called soft skills. And I'm not a fan of calling soft skills soft because they're hard. What this report told us is that we also need to learn skills like strong communications, problem solving, collaboration, how to break down barriers. And when you can combine those technical skills like mechanical, electrical, softwares, and data with being able to build and lead a team and collaborate and solve problems, that is the skill set and job workforce of the future. And I'm really excited that this research, again, needs to be continued to expand it, because the future is a combination of these series of skills, both technical, communication, collaboration, and others. And that leads me to my 8th point. Now, for those of you who are meeting me for the first time, you're probably seeing in the first half hour, Kristin's a little verbose. She likes to talk. I do like to communicate, friends. It's really important in our work. But too often, we're not speaking in the same language. So my 8th recommendation is we must use plain language. Now, the old term, which we don't use anymore because it's not equitable or accessible, is maybe layman's terms. That's a term that is going on the outs. So what we instead call it is plain language. Now, I want you to think to yourself, how would you talk about your technology, your work, your field, even transportation, to a 4-year-old? How would you talk about the future of transportation, connectivity, and automation to your grandfather? How would you talk about someone with a 4th grade reading level? Well, that is actually what is defined as plain language. The average American has a 4th grade reading level. So if you are using engineering speak, lawyer speak, and trust me, as a recovering lawyer, I used to use way too much lawyerese. We need to communicate better, because the adage reminds us, if we cannot communicate what we're doing, It is as though we are not doing it. And I want to share a story. When we were doing our meaningful public engagement in the state of Minnesota, we were going out to communities all across the state and meeting them where they were at, including the Hmong community, which is the largest community of Hmong and Vietnamese populations outside of Vietnam. And when I was going into some of these Hmong community centers and homes, we were talking about the future of transportation. We were talking about connectivity, automation, and some of these skill sets. And one of the younger women who was in high school, who was translating for her elder grandmother and the other elders, asked me, ma'am, I need you to stop. You keep saying this word infrastructure. I don't even know what that is. What is that? I don't even know how to translate it. And it reminded me, we are not talking in the same language, whether it's Hmong or English. We should be talking about our work in plain language. So I challenge all of you in 2025, the new year and beyond, figure out how you can meaningfully communicate your work to all audiences in a plain language manner. And that takes leadership, which leads me to number 9. We all need to understand our leadership values. So join me in questioning, what is your leadership philosophy? Have you ever thought about it? Do you take enough time out of the busy workday and your busy personal lives to think about it? Or alternatively, what are the professional values you live by? Not just the values that sit on the walls of your institution or organization. What are your values? Simon Sinek, who is an organizational psychologist and someone that I very closely follow, reminds us that success is not about performance. It is about trust. And trust is built on fundamental values like kindness and empathy. Now, are you hearing some familiarity? Empathy is the first step in human-centered design, like we talked about. And so to be vulnerable, as a good leader should, I want to share with you my leadership philosophy. I have the honor at the U.S. Department of Transportation of working with an executive coach. And a while ago, we sat down and she asked me this question: what is your philosophy for leadership? And I reflected on it and I wrote down the 10 following values. First is setting a clear vision. My second value is situational leadership, which, if you don't know situational leadership and you haven't seen this chart, Google it. It's a wonderful philosophy we don't have time to talk about today. Third is servant leadership, which is very common in the civil service and the public sector, because I remind my team, I am here to serve them. They are not here to serve me. We are public and civil servants, all of us. The fourth is humility. Check your ego at the door. It doesn't belong anywhere where we work. Humility is what builds bridges. Fifth is accountability. And here's the deal, guys. I screw up. I screw up a lot. I'm not perfect. I fail all the time. And I need to hold myself accountable and admit to when I fail. And I want our team and our sector to hold me accountable and our agencies accountable when we do fail. Sixth is growth and self-development. Are you prioritizing time to do things like lists, like learn, to ensure that your team is taking training and development courses, to make sure they have mentors and sponsors? Seventh is psychological safety. If you do not know the definition to that term, you need to Google it. It is a critical centerpiece to the health of any organization. My eighth value is promoting mental health and wellness. Like I talked about at the beginning of my conversation with you all, I just am coming off a week-long yoga and meditation retreat. Now, maybe that's not your cup of tea and that's okay, but you need to figure out how you can maintain your own health and balance and wellness. My ninth value is diversity, equity, inclusion, and what I like to add, which is belonging. Belonging is critical to making us feel like we're valued in the workplace. And lastly, honestly, everyone, my 10th value is having fun. Let's bring a little joy and spark into our work. So the 10th value and principle that I'd like to see is focusing on our people. A lot of the times we talk about the technology, the innovation, the infrastructure improvement, the roundabout, the investment we're making. Here at the Department of Transportation, we have a lot of numbers we like to talk about. We have our 3rd year anniversary of the bipartisan infrastructure law, which was a $1 trillion investment in transportation. We have 1 in every $4 in federal highways flowing through us through the states out of bill. We have $108 billion obligated, 200,000 miles of road invested, 10,000 bridges awarded, 19 new folks, 60,000 new projects across the DOT. Yes, that was fast. But those are just numbers, my friends. That is not an outcome or indicator of whether anyone is better off. And we can't ask that if we're not focusing on the people who deliver these programs. Are you focusing on your team members? Are you asking them if they're well? Are you building strong, diverse teams? Are they feeling included? Are you prioritizing their health and wellness? As Simon Sinek reminds us, leading is not about being in charge, but serving those in your charge. So empower the teams around you, be a servant, humbly lead, and let's focus on humility to ensure our people are our top priority. At the Federal Highway Administration, we launched a new annual All-Employee Appreciation Week where we center on 5 key values that I'm going to share as I close. And I hope you can all incorporate your own form of appreciation with your own team, colleagues, and friends. Now, again, I know we've got 20 minutes left. I told you I'd have a top 10 list, but sorry, Henry and friends, I really am bad at counting. I've got a couple more nuggets for you. So my 11th is those numbers I just spouted off about our investment, billions and hundreds of thousands of miles and projects. Those are just numbers. They don't tell the story of how we're helping improve communities. So what I'd like us to incorporate is performance-based measurement. Now, I want to give you a great resource. This is someone, Mark Friedman, who used to be with the Government Accountability Office, a federal agency who helped measure our performance. And his book is entitled Trying Hard is Not Good Enough, because he questioned whether the right metrics are things like how many miles of road markings did I install? How many new projects did I launch? How many partnerships did I put on the dotted line and sign this year? How many grants did I get? Those, my friends, are not levels and measures of performance. The real question is whether anyone is better off with our work. What is the cost benefit of eliminating near misses? How are we saving lives, and how many lives are we saving with every investment we're making? I believe that you smart humans with the leadership of CCAT and other research institutions can help us understand how to develop performance-based measures for technology and innovation. 12, and I'm coming down to the end, my friends. As the 5th woman to lead the Federal Highway Administration and the youngest, it still deadens me when I hear the United Nations statistic that it will be 286 years until the United States achieves gender equity. The top leaders in our field are not women. People like me, I am one of 3% of female executives in transportation. And the challenges are real. As the Women in the Workplace and leanin.org report reminds us, I am twice as likely to be interrupted than a man. My judgment is often questioned because I'm a woman. I'm 3.5 times more likely to do office housework. Yes, I'm still asked to take notes and plan parties. I'm twice as likely as a young man to have my age questioned. Ageism is not fun, my friends. And the broken rung is a real thing. For every 100 men promoted, listen to this, only 54 Black women are promoted. So we have some work to do. I do not want to just be the 5th woman and the youngest. I don't want to be the first, and I certainly don't want to be the last. I want you to join me in the 5 key characteristics that the Lean In and McKinsey study reminds us to promote gender equity in our field, which is allyship, tone from the top so that leaders are talking about this. 3 is sponsoring someone in your organization, not mentoring them, but sponsoring them, which is using your personal power and your network to develop a career path for the individuals that are reporting to you and you're mentoring, and ensure you're using your power and your network to get them to the job they want to achieve. And the 5th is making sure you continue to have these conversations. Ask yourselves, and you ask your team members, if a work emergency came up tomorrow and you had to solve a really hard problem and didn't know how, who are the 3 or 5 people you would call? If you don't have that network, I want to be a part of that network, but we will not achieve gender equity if we don't have it. And so, lucky 13, as I'm closing, friends, again, I can't count, but this, I promise, is my last recommendation. I told you I wasn't good at math, but it's my last week, and I'm feeling a little charitable as I'm concluding my work during the holiday season. My last and 13th reminder is to always, always focus on the mission. Ruthlessly prioritize your work. If you have more than 5 goals, 5 priorities, 5 strategic planning items, it's too many. Too many priorities is the same as having none. So as I close, I want to ask you, who's going to join me in the fight to champion safe, inclusive, and innovative transportation and transformation? As Winston Churchill reminded us, success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is, in fact, the courage to continue that counts. So as I close, I want to share with you the 5 values that I hope you incorporate as you appreciate the employees in the network and even the people on this call. 1 is practice gratitude. Have a gratitude journal. Say 3 things I'm grateful for today. 2 is connect with someone. Maybe you'll meet someone on this call. Look at the names on this list. Reach out to them on LinkedIn. Connect. 3 is appreciate them. Henry, CCAT team, I appreciate you for convening us today. 4th is care. This is both self-care, taking care of yourself, but making sure you're taking care of the people around you and your coworkers. And the 5th is joy. We are in a season of giving and joy, my friends. Let's have a little fun. So with my time nigh, I just want to leave these 5 questions to live by. What are your leadership values? How do you communicate them? What are the words hung on the walls of your institution? How are you helping your team prioritize psychological safety? And how are you bringing these values into your work? As I leave you all at Federal Highways, I will honor what Audre Lorde said, that rest is a radical act of resistance. I hope you will join me in resting, my friends. Second, I hope you will join me in working with me in the transportation industry long and into the future. I am going to take some time and play in my home state of the beautiful Black Hills of South Dakota, and I'm going to connect and reconnect with my family, with my dog, Teddy, and hopefully with all of you. And fifth, I will set goals, continue to meditate, and continue to be so grateful to be a part of this industry. So as I finally share with you, Doe Zantamata reminds us that it's only in our darkest hours that we may discover the true strength of the brilliant light within ourselves, that we can never, ever be dimmed. And I thank you. Be safe, be well. And Henry, I am very excited for our conversation. Thank you for allowing me to be here.
Thank you so much, Kristin. I want to say, follow your suggestions. I want to appreciate your time to be here to talk to us, for your such an inspiring speech. I learned quite a bit, not only your 13 ideas, but also a few tips in terms of the books, the situational leadership and others. And so that's great. Thank you so much. I have a really long list of questions, and so I will try to see whether I can go through some of these. I might not be able to go all of these. And a lot of these is related with upcoming administration, and then some of these availability of the resources and things like that. And then I'm going to start with something really impact us and really impact particularly for researchers like Amtree and IMCD, particularly related. We do a lot of research on V2X. And there's a question is there a pathway to include V2X in the next reauthorization? What do you think? And what can DOT do to voice this need?
Great questions, everyone. You saw me reference that V2X deployment plan. There's a reason we launched this year. So I would say yes. Now, first and foremost, I think it's very important to acknowledge that in a time of transition, there will be change, right? And so values might change in the new administration. But one thing that we know that they prioritize is innovation, technology, and transformation. So it's really important to know that you are in a great space right now. Now, if we want to continue to fund and seek more federal funding, which may not be a priority for the incoming administration, I would encourage you to rely on your associations and your advocacy groups to really work with congressional members to ensure that connected vehicle and other technologies are fully funded as a part of the next surface reauthorization bill, which again, that will be happening in 2026. So as I conclude on the answer to this question, I do know AASHTO has already publicly released their reauthorization principles for the Surface Transportation Act. And this is something that they are thinking about. So I would encourage you, come up with those principles, work with your congressional leaders. They are here to listen to you, and they want to see technology and transformation continue to grow.
Excellent, excellent. So the first question is on connectivity. The second question will be on automation. Can you comment on any upcoming regulation regarding automated vehicles?
I cannot. Now, maybe in a couple of days when I'm post-administration friends, we might get to have another more candid conversation. So there's a hint. But just a reminder for those of you that are in the regulatory space, whether it's automation or otherwise, the federal rulemaking calendar is public. It's not something I even really looked at before I joined the U.S. Department of Transportation. And not many people look at that calendar. So that will tell you when regulations are forthcoming. And if you do or don't see things on there, you should be reaching out to your federal agency partners to advocate for them.
Very good. Very good. So the next one, will issues like equity and environmental justice play at all in transportation investment in the coming years?
And I want to honor the space. First and foremost, in the diversity, equity, and inclusion fields, we talk about honoring our feelings and honoring maybe the tension that a lot of us are seeing. There are lawsuits trying to counter the disadvantaged business enterprise, the DBE program, for example. There's a large national conversation about whether venture capital can be looked at through a cultural or different ethnic lens. And I think two things need to be understood. One, my friends, is we may not use the same terminology, but we need diverse perspectives in this field. This is why DEI is one of both my personal core values and one of the core values of the Federal Highway Administration. So whether or not we use terms like DEI, and I do believe personally that we should, I think public corporations saying that they're bowing away from these ideas is really unfortunate. But we need to ensure that every American has the same right to move around and to get home safely. And secondly, the same goes for resiliency, which might be now called resiliency instead of sustainability. As we saw with the hurricanes and Helene and Milton, and please do, if you are prayerful people or if you're people that want to send thoughts their way, the South needs our thoughts. They were devastated because climate change is real, whether or not we want to believe in it. And infrastructure, technology, and your innovations you're all working on are necessary. So again, the words might look a little different, but these values will continue to be a core part of the transportation system of the future.
Very good. So given your experience in both state and state DOT and also USDOT, the federal agency, do you see any changes in the respective roles of the state DOTs versus the USDOT in the next administration?
I can anticipate it is very likely, my friends. You know, we live in a federal state system where, as we at Federal Highways like to say, we are federally funded but state-led. The state departments of transportation, the MPOs, cities, counties, and other regional bodies, they have a lot of authority and power and need to because they're most local to the issues at hand. And so we're probably going to see more of a shift on really focusing on those state and regional and local priorities. There is a large conversation happening in Capitol Hill and across the country about whether we move away from discretionary grants and maybe towards more formula funding. And that's a conversation that will need to be had in the next 2 years. But I can see maybe a re-heightened conversation on state and local leadership.
Very good. So I'm going to ask some of the questions from today's questions list. So how do you see cities improve mass transportation in dense populated small cities set up for cars? What are the innovations for buses and particularly Ann Arbor being one of those cities being mentioned in the question as well?
Well, I love a good Ann Arbor reference. So of course, we're all with friends here at CCAT at University of Michigan. I think we harken back to this idea that buses are the original form of public transportation and shared mobility. And one of the things we've had this conversation with my colleagues at Federal Transit Administration with our secretary, we do need to invest more in public transportation. And that's whether or not you're a large urban area or a smaller city or a rural community. I mentioned my personal transportation story. We did not have public transportation when I grew up in my small town. We were forced to have our own personal vehicles because that was the only option. So I can't necessarily create a roadmap for every single city across America or every community, large or small, but we know we need to advocate for more investment in public transportation.
Very good, very good. And what do you envision the new administration will likely to focus on the transportation industry? A lot of questions related with what do you expect to happen?
Yeah.
In the next
and I cannot, I was joking last week at an event with colleagues where I actually usually have a magic 8-ball, my friends, and I've been shaking it really hard the last few weeks, and it still comes up, future is unclear. So I can't predict the future despite wanting to desperately, but I can imagine we were very fortunate, everyone, that the last 4 years we had a Congress and a federal government, all levels of government were committed to investing in infrastructure. Now, can I predict that will happen again? I cannot, But I do hope that it does, because as we all know in transportation, we are in the best industry with the best mission to save lives. So I do hope, and I think we can all advocate and use that plain language, that our mission critical work is to save lives. And that is very nonpartisan and bipartisan work.
Yeah. And this question is also quite interesting. What do you think about the opportunity related with new forms of mobility? For example, the personal rapid transit, and there's an example of glideways. I don't know whether you know the glideway. It's a dedicated, autonomous shuttle on the guided way. I think dedicated guided way. So Glideway is one example of the question posed.
Yes, thank you for that discussion. I am not and cannot comment on any one individual technology or company, but I do think questions remain in human-centered design, those principles. And one of the questions that you would encounter if you were brainstorming and ideating is, how are we going to acquire rights of way for these types of personal rapid transit option? Public rights of way, friends and colleagues, into the future will become more and more important, and there will be more and more demands on public rights of way. And it is the public's. So we have to understand, how do we ensure it is equitably distributed for all?
Very good. So from your speech, one of the things you mentioned is the gender imbalance. And this is a question related to that. How can we empower and encourage young girls in K-12 schools to consider and pursue STEM careers in transportation? And studies from the National Girls Collaborative Project and the ruling our experience shows that we still have a lot of work to do. What communication and outreach strategy have you found to be the most impactful?
Well, and I love that question is from my friend and colleague, Rich Granger, who's already doing extraordinary work in the workforce development field. So I encourage you all to look at his work in Ohio. But to answer your question, I'll try and be brief in 3 key points. First is, research shows that by the age of 5, young girls are already being told what they can and cannot do, what they're not capable of. Boys are being told to be strong. Women are, let's play. So we have to make sure our language around young girls is intentional, and that we tell them that transportation is the best career and you need to be an innovator in that field. The second thing is, I think we need to add an A to STEM. It needs to be STEAM, because we cannot have arts and sciences without the arts. Humanities are critical, because that's that plain language, human-centered design element of empathetic inquiry. And you have to empathize by understanding the humanity in all of us. And the third thing I would say more tactically is, if you're not already involved with organizations like Black Girls Code, Girls Who Code, Girl Scouts, and others, you should be. And all of you should be volunteering your time in those organizations.
Thank you. This question is also very interesting, and this is, thank you so much for this great discussion and for all your work at Federal Highway in shaping a better transportation future. As we approach a new administration and reauthorization, how can MPOs and local partners continue to build on the success of the programs such as SS4A under the IIJA? Many MPOs are eager to take on a bigger role, whether through direct funding for safety planning or provide technical support for local partners to ensure lasting safety improvement and meeting performance measures. How do you see MPOs and local government expanding their impact in areas like safety, and what role do you see partners with university playing in creating more innovative and data-driven solutions?
Well, first and foremost, shout out to my AMPO friends for their great leadership. AMPO is a wonderful organization you should all be familiar with and following. And I know we don't have a lot of time. We have 2 minutes left, so I can't expand as much as I'd like to on this question, but I think there's a couple key areas. One is, I do think MPOs and regional bodies have a key liaison role between state DOTs, cities. And so I'd love to see AMPO, AASHTO, NACTO, NLC working together. Maybe there's a new collaborative idea in there somewhere. I don't know. And the second, on the idea of innovative data-driven solutions, why don't you all in that collaborative work with research institutions like those on this call to come up with, again, performance-based measures to measure how our transportation innovation is saving lives and building resilient communities and connecting people?
Well, thank you so much, Kristin. that's all the time we have for today. So I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today. Also, as a reminder, we will host our 8th annual Global Symposium on Mobility Innovation on Friday, March 28th of 2025. And registration will open during the TRB annual meeting next month. And you can learn more by visiting the CCAT website. And speaking of TRB, CCAT, along with Armtree, MCity, and also the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department at the University of Michigan, will be hosting a networking reception on Sunday, January 5th at 6 p.m. in the Shaw Ballroom at the Courtyard Residence Inn. You can add this networking reception to your calendar by clicking the link in the chat box. I'm sure Calvin is putting there. And Kristin, you're welcome to join us as well if you're going to TRB. And thank you for joining us today. And we hope you all have a great rest of the day and also the holiday season. Thank you.
Thank you, friends. Be safe. Happy holidays.
Thank you.